have a vested interest in this project and will commit both at the political level, but also at the government level, in engaging in using that project to really develop and put in place the right structures, the right institutions, and the right framework for the future of waste management on the islands. As you know, the islands, my thing went off now, okay. As you can imagine, islands face a number of threats, not only climate change and biodiversity, but also the challenges of managing chemicals and waste. The people on the islands want the same things that we want here in the bigger countries: mobiles, laptops, cars, the same consumer items. We take it for granted here in Europe and elsewhere. The islands also have them. The problem is when they finish dealing with those consumer items, is what do they do with it? Countries like my colleague from the Maldives, they've run out of space. They don't have any space to put the waste, because the traditional thinking in the past has been disposal of waste as dump sites or landfills or whatever you call it, and they've run out of space, and they've been looking for another island, another atoll, to try and fill inside the atoll, so that then they can create land. You can see the challenge there, and of course the minister from Bahamas would know very well. They gave a contract to a company, a private company, to manage their waste, and then the private company just left everything to them, and they had to go and find out how to sort out. They had landfill fires. So there's a lot of challenges, and of course I come to, let's say, Seychelles, for example. We have 100,000 people. Guess how many tourists we have visiting the Seychelles? 300,000 and growing. That's 3 times more waste than this island could actually sustain. And they are looking for solutions. They're looking for solutions on how to deal with the waste. So the problem is really very evident. The problem of chemicals and waste is really very evident when you go to the islands. And hopefully this project will be able to address some of these challenges. And I'm really, really excited that we're launching this project today. And just to give you a few statistics from what this project will achieve. I mean, this is one of the largest and just biggest investments. So it's betting on us islands to get this right. So again, there's a lot riding on this, and I know I will not let the GEF down when we put the resources in action in the islands. And I think there's a lot to learn as well, for the rest of the world. I think the islands will also be able to show what we can do at small scale and be able to scale this up and show that it's really possible to really have the sound management, both of chemicals and on waste. So just to give you an indication on what the project intends to achieve is we want to prevent over 150,000 tons of plastic pollution, reduce over 650 tons of toxic chemicals, avoid nearly 40 tons of mercury globally. We have no way to put mercury, Monica. If you go to the islands, they have the hospitals, they have amalgam, and these are very small amounts you can actually carry in a bag. But the problem is how you're going to carry it. So you need to have systems in place that you can deal with this. Avoidance of emissions of POPs to the air equivalent to 197 GTEQ, and reach nearly 4 million people across the seas region. So really covering and having an impact on a huge a range of regions, from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. And believe me, all these regions have their specificities, different challenges. And this is also another area where we'll make this project exciting, because really there will not be one cap-fit-all kind of solution. Each island will need to work out what is the solution that fits them, and they have to work with the private sector. So I'm really excited to see our colleagues from shipping today. I met them in Samoa. Many of the islands are facing shipping issues now, and this has been raised to me by both Seychelles and Mauritius, for example, and even France, who has Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean, because the shipping companies have stopped taking waste, because Basel Convention has been effective in trying to avoid the shipment of waste to countries that do not have the capacity to deal with waste. So on the other side of the coin, we need to find ways and work with shipping companies to see how we can effectively create the capacity that is needed. And like I said, the amount of waste is big by island terms, but by global terms is really small. And we need to be able to scale this up so that it can become economically viable, either for recycling, for recovery, and for all the other processes that we have to deal with in a circular mode. So SWA Shipping has great experience in the Pacific, and I hope they will be able to share their experience with us this evening. And also we have our colleagues from the tourism industry. I see great potential for working with a very vibrant and a very dynamic industry in looking at how we can address waste and chemicals management from the tourism industry. I think there's big scope there. So I will stop here, Gustavo. I just wanted to just share that this is important for the islands for all these reasons that I've mentioned. And I want everybody to be engaged. I would like to thank the GEF. I'd like to thank UNEP for taking on this big role as implementing agency, for UNDP as well for coming together, and obviously for all the other organizations that will be working together with us to actually address the issue of waste and chemicals in small island developing states. Thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you very much, Rolf, and thanks for highlighting what this program is trying to achieve in terms of its KPIs, which are very important and very ambitious, but also to point out that this is a very visible program for both the GEF and for all stakeholders that are involved. And as we know, success brings more success and brings more resources. And there's a lot riding on this, and let's hope that we all collectively work towards that goal, because it's going to be important for future such investments when we have the ability to do it once again. It's now my pleasure to invite Ms. Ana Montud, the Permanent Secretary of St. Lucia, to take the floor and provide her remarks. Ms. Anita, the floor is yours.
Good evening, distinguished delegates and colleagues. It is my very great pleasure to speak today on behalf of not only St. Lucia, but also the Caribbean region to mark the launch of the GEF Islands program. The Islands program has been developed in close consultation with SEEDS globally over the past 3 years, and today is the culmination of the process resulting in a new booth. GEF Island is our program and designed to meet our needs. We, the Caribbean region, wish to thank GEF for this significant investment, not only in the Caribbean, but in SEEDS globally. In St. Lucia, as with many SEEDS, we face many issues around chemical and waste management. With waste management associated with tourism, plastic waste management, persistent organic pollutants, e-waste, just to name a few. The only landfill in St. Lucia is close to capacity, and finding suitable and available land space for a new landfill is proving to be extremely difficult. The issue of land space is also true to all Caribbean SEEDS, and I venture to say that the same could be said for SEEDS globally, particularly in view of the small landmass. In order to protect and conserve our fragile ecosystem for the survival of our current and future population, current practices around waste management must change locally and globally. This is imperative. The way we manage waste and the way we think about waste must change. In the context of the Stockholm and Minamata Convention, islands provide us SEEDS great opportunity to make systemic changes required to move from the status quo towards circularity. However, a sound legislative framework is critical for this change to take place in order to produce the results that we desire. The Islands Program recognizes that the issue faced by SEEDS cannot be addressed by SEEDS government alone. To be truly effective to reduce waste and protecting our environment, we must work together across society to involve the private sector and industry, inclusive of sectors such as tourism, hospitality, recycling, shipping, cruise lines, and others. Critical to the success of the Islands program is changing behaviors of our seeds population, and especially that the young persons, as they are our future. In St. Lucia, we have years of experience working with young people as part of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, CYEN, and a number of similar youth groups. However, more unsustained involvement of youth and other like-minded groupings is an imperative for success of the Islands program. St. Lucia looks forward to sharing its experiences and to learn from other seeds, looking at best practices, as learning by example is one of the most effective ways of learning, as costly and time-consuming mistakes can be avoided. We have been working on a bottle return bill for a number of years and are hopeful that this will come to fruition very shortly. There is also public-private partnership involved in the plastic value chain. One such initiative is the Replas OACS pilot plastic recycling project implemented by Unite Caribbean. The project has incentivized the collection of plastic waste, particularly PET and HDPE, and has realized the export of clean plastic to a recycling facility in Honduras. In closing, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to GEF, UNEP, and my fellow seed representative for your commitment to bringing islands to life. I eagerly look forward to engaging in islands over the next 5 years and to witness the real benefits that stem from the project activities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Montot. And it's great to hear from you and from an island state how these challenges are affecting your future development and how the program can help, and the importance of having multi-stakeholder platforms and involving multiple sectors in order to address this problem of reduced land space moving forward. So thank you for that testimony. I'd like to invite now the Chairman and CEO of the Global Environment Facility, Mr. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, for his statements. Carlos, please.
Thank you so much, Gustavo, and real pleasure to be here this afternoon. Unfortunately, I will begin with some bad news. According to Global Witness, 2020 was the year that most environmental leaders were murdered in Latin America and the Caribbean, my region. In 2020, 227 environmental leaders were murdered because of environmental conflicts. Yesterday, one environmental leader from the Caribbean was murdered. But this time, opposed to what we normally see in the news, where some leader of an NGO or a community was killed, this time was a minister, the Minister of Environment from República Dominicana, Dominican Republic, Orlando Jorge Mera. He attended last week the summit in Stockholm, and today he's not with us. He was murdered because of his zero tolerance policy and his commitment to implement the environmental rule of law. I want to recognize his leadership as a Caribbean environmental leader, and I wish peace to his soul and condolences to his family. Thank you. Having said this, I want to express my joy and my gratefulness to be here launching this initiative with everybody who is here and you all at the same time, due to the fact that we normally associate islands with climate change and the impact of sea rise. But this project wants to help them in many other different forms. And even though climate change is a huge threat to island nations, pollution, toxic pollution, solid waste pollution is a huge major challenge that they are confronted with. For the last 2 years, we have read, and we still don't believe it, but we have read many times that in the near future there will be more plastic than fish in the water. And let me tell you, that is true. That is true. And I can tell you that that is true because I'm a surfer. I surf the waves. I've been surfing for 43 years. I have seen the ocean on a weekly basis for 43 years. I know my waves. I know my waves as you know your way from your home to your work and the other way around. I know each corner, each rock, each sections of the many different waves. And the wave has changed, and the ocean has changed. 43 years ago, my concern was, a shark. And we used to surf with sharks and crocodiles. Now my concern is being get sick because of water quality. My concern is the health of my beach and my waves because of plastic. Plastic is everywhere, everywhere. And the surfers, we have even worse news, not just pollution, chemical pollution and solid waste pollution, but also climate change is impacting our sport. Well, surfing is not a sport. This is a style of life. We are surfers. We are not, sport. This is the way we choose to live. Climate change is impacting the surfing community big time, not just because of pollution, but also it's changing the weather patterns. And you tend to believe that you have bigger storms and bigger waves. That is not correct. In the Caribbean of Costa Rica, which I surf normally, there are no waves anymore because the trade winds are not there. Yes, we got more hurricanes, but hurricanes though are not good for surfing within the islands. The trade winds and the low pressures were what gave us wave, and wave for us is a style of life, but also the connection with nature. And I have seen everything change in my years as a surfer, 43 years. And I'm really concerned about that. But, surfing for me is a lifestyle, but the ocean, and I enjoy the ocean. I love the ocean. But for others, it's more like a lifestyle, it's the source of livelihood. They depend on the ocean and the economic activities associated to the ocean. Pollution, toxic pollution, solid waste pollution is a major threat to the well-being of people of the islands. Yes, climate change is a major threat, but we need to see what they got in front of their noses in terms of the very immediate challenges. They depend on producing their food, they depend on their own fresh water, and they depend on tourism. And yes, of course, pollution is not good for tourism. And let me tell you, I won't say the name of this country, but last March I went to a country because it's famous because of the waves, and the waves were spectacular, but it was full of plastic, full of plastic. I will never, ever go back to that country because I didn't have my connection with nature and the ocean. I will never go there because of the plastic pollution. I will never go there because people don't feel threatened by the plastic pollution. And I hope that this island and these people really understand that they live out of a healthy ocean. In that context, I'm extremely happy to be here with ministers and leaders, the conventions, the private sector, all pulling together in the same direction. The GEF, particularly in this last replenishment, made a strong emphasis in supporting those nations which are more vulnerable, not just to climate change, but to the global environmental degradation. And being here this afternoon makes me extremely happy as the CEO of the GEF, but also, yes, indeed, as a surfer. Makes me very happy that I'm helping everybody else to have a healthy ocean. Our dear, our renowned friend, marine conservationist Sylvia Earle says that there won't be any green without the blue. And that is totally correct. There won't be any green without the blue. And here we are investing in the blue for the sake of everybody that lives in the green. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, for pointing out the interconnectedness of all these environmental problems, how they come together. When the GEF began its journey towards greater integration across the different focal areas that map out to the different conventions, and became convinced that we needed to bring these lines of funding closer together, it's not because we wanted to do this out of any intuition necessarily, but it's because reality on the ground called for it. So this program is not only going to deal with the chemicals issue as its principal focus, but by doing this, we are also helping with the biodiversity challenge and the land-ocean connection that Carlos Manuel provided from a lifetime surfer perspective, which I think is very important. So thanks for this, and Rolf, your convention will also be benefiting many others. So well, thank you very much for that perspective. So it's a great pleasure now to move on to our next speaker, Monica Istanki. Monica is the executive secretary of the Minamata Convention, which is the baby within the GEF arena. It's the last convention that came to us, and let's hope that we are providing you with some good services and also helping enhance our chemicals and waste focal area. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good day to everyone. And yes, you are correct that the Minamata Convention is the youngest global environmental treaty, but not for too long. I think there are new babies on the way, so we enjoy this privilege for a little while only, and then we would join the ones that are maybe more established. But as always, I appreciate the opportunity to join you, dear co-panelists and audience, and to talk about Islands project. And when we hear the program name, Islands, our minds jump into the unique situation and vulnerabilities of the small islands developing states, which Minamata Convention and others have highlighted for specific attention. But the name Islands also signifies something the world must move towards: sustainable law and non-chemical development. The program brings together so many important elements of sustainability in one cohesive and coordinated effort. And with that, it limits the risks that are inherent with smaller fragmented approaches. So this is a great example for the entire world. This project is advancing the implementation of the Minamata Convention in participating countries, and with the strong involvement of the Basel centers and other partners, it takes science-driven approach by building on the priorities identified in the Minamata initial assessments, while also paving the way for the longer-term sustainable financing of the implemented improvements. It takes a preventive approach by supporting countries as they address, for example, mercury in products such as thermometers or mercury in e-waste in order to eliminate their hazardous waste impacts. And also they support countries, the program support countries to control trade in elemental mercury. As you may know, the Minamata Convention has a very strong life cycle focus on prevention, preventing health risks, but also preventing accumulation of more and more waste. Our parties have just approved the addition of several more of mercury-containing products to be phased out, and they are now on the list that prohibits their manufacture, import, and export. And implementing this expansion of mercury-added products phase out, our parties will make a tangible impact to prevent the risk. So the project comes really timely and match the development on the global arena in this regard. Over time, with circular economy approaches, we can really envision the prevention of hazardous waste, but for a harmful element like mercury, we are not talking about recycling really. That is not appropriate for mercury when its use is being eliminated. We are talking about stopping its use. Islands also facilitates regional approaches to trade, including the controlling of import of mercury. So this harmful element is not used for the uses that are banned under the convention, or to prevent it is diverted to uncontrolled use in artisanal small-scale gold mining. But because seeds are dependent upon imports for many uses and have limited options for disposal, this preventive approach is really and critically important. As Rolf, you have mentioned also, the project is great that it really have a deep dive into what is needed on a country level so that the solutions are tailored to the specific circumstances, local regulations, and community engagement. I would like to highlight that our parties are increasingly able to provide evidence-based descriptions of their needs, and we are so pleased that this program, as well as continuing focus on the seats within GEF 8, addresses these needs. There is also another very important aspect of the islands that provides a model for other programs. It provides a powerful example of the potential for leveraging private sector funding, and in this case, it's shipping and tourism and cruise industry. The private sector engagement, including through co-financing, but this is not only about money, allows governments to direct their limited public financing towards the investments that are really needed and pay off. Chemicals and waste projects overall have an enormous potential to attract and leverage private sector involvement, so this is one really excellent example. We know, and my colleagues have mentioned, that harmful chemicals and waste threaten biodiversity and critical ecosystems, and we know that the health of biota and ecosystem is essential to our human beings' health, and we know that pollution is a threat to economy and livelihoods of people. And putting all this together in a coherent program is still a skill in its infancy, and I applaud this program for taking it on. We have been very supportive of GEF focus on supply chain transformation, which will give space for further private sector participation. We have also been very supportive of the GEF 8 approach, which recognizes that progress in biodiversity, land degradation, climate change, international waters, and chemicals and waste is best achieved by not only recognizing that they are mutually supportive and beneficial, but by designing programs and projects in a way that maximize the benefits to all. So congratulations to the Islands program, all countries, and UNEP and other partners involved, as well as GEF, for showing us how. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thanks for describing the role that the objective of eliminating the use of mercury can play in islands, but also for bringing us this additional dimension of health that we haven't touched upon so far, which just happens to be the connective tissue of the entire GEF 8 strategy that we denominated a healthy planet, healthy people approach. So when we look into every one of the environmental dimensions that the GEF has been asked to provide support and financing, there is a human health component, a human well-being component. And if we look across how this all interconnects, we can see that the goal of protecting the planet is a direct goal of protecting ourselves and the health of our children and grandchildren. So thanks for bringing that up. There will be now a high-level multi-stakeholder roundtable, but before we go to that section of the program, I understand that there will be a video that will show just now. And over to you. Thank you.
Small islands are special places on Earth.
In addition to climate change and sea level rise,
a rising tide of waste seriously threatens small islands' development.
This includes hazardous waste,
plastic waste, and electronic waste.
Waste that small islands do not have the landmass
or the technical capacity to manage sustainably.
Chemicals and waste problems in small islands come from
our changing consumption patterns,
employing proper management.
In small islands, poor management of chemicals and waste are a threat to my health.
A threat to my health.
A threat to my health. They are a threat to marine ecosystems,
to communities, to local businesses,
and to some of the world's most beautiful landscapes.
How can we protect our land?
Protéger nos eaux, protéger notre population.
Protect
our people from toxic chemicals and hazardous waste.
What systems and facilities do we need to improve waste management?
How can we limit the imports that contribute to the buildup of hazardous waste?
How can we overcome the challenges to our geography and limited access to recycling markets?
How can communities get involved?
How can young people get involved?
How can we keep our island safe
and free from harmful chemicals and toxic waste?
We'll learn from each other.
We will do it together.
We'll get help when we can.
Join the islands community.
Join the islands community.
Thank you so much for this very nice video. And I will now handle the floor to another moderator for the remainder of this session, Mr. Zuru Aoki. Chiz is a colleague of mine, and she's the lead environmental specialist at the GEF Secretariat that handles all of our MEA relations in addition to our adaptation work. Chiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gustavo, and good evening, colleagues and those who are following this remotely. Now, we're very pleased to now have the high-level multi-stakeholder roundtable, and where we can hear directly from three very distinguished private sector representatives. Two of them are in person here today, and we have one person actually joining remotely. Today we have, let me introduce the private sector panelists. Megan Morikawa, Global Director of the Sustainability Office of Iberostar Group. She's joining us virtually. And we're very pleased to have James Woodrow, Managing Director of Swire Shipping today, as well as Richard Pruitt, Vice President of Carnival Cruise Line here. It's quite impressive that we have today here that major household name private sector players joining us on this particular panel, but also as supporters of the island program. So we also want to make this as interactive as possible within a fairly limited time. So I'm going to be posing the three private sector representatives one question each. And after that, I'm going to circle back to the distinguished panelists we had earlier, Rolf, as well as Cross Manuel, and Her Excellency, to reflect on the individual perspectives shared by the private sector. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So without much ado, let's first start with James from Swire. Okay, so how does the Jeff Island initiative fit with Swire's core business? And can you tell us a little bit about your reasons to be engaged and involved in this particular initiative? Over to you.
Thank you very much. So I've been with Swire Shipping for 32 years, and I've been traveling around the Papua New Guinea and the South Pacific Islands. I'm not a surfer, but I've seen firsthand the effect of plastics and waste on the people who live in the islands. And Swire Shipping is the biggest operator in Papua New Guinea and the South Pacific Islands. So we bring a lot of goods into the islands, and we want to be part of the solution, taking waste out of the Pacific Islands. So 4 years ago, we set up the Moana Taka partnership. Moana is ocean, Taka is circular, where we ship for free waste out of Papua New Guinea and the South Pacific back to developed nations where it's sustainably and safely recycled. Building off that, what we're hoping is with the Islands Waste-Free Shipping Partnership that we can get other lines in the Pacific involved, but also shipping lines in the Caribbean to get involved in shipping waste out of the SIDS to be sustainably recycled. So why are we doing it? Swire is part of a family company that's 200 years old. So it's now owned by the 6th generation. Swire Shipping itself is 150 years old this year. We want to be part of the solution because it's the right thing to do. We service these communities. We have a lot of staff in these communities, and we want to help them to live a better life. For us, it is about making sure that we are working in the world and leaving it a better place for succeeding generations. And we're hoping that by leveraging off the island's waste-free shipping partnership, that we can do our bit to help. So that's really why we're involved. We are a family company. We service these markets, and we want to be part of the solution to manage waste more effectively and make sure it's sustainably recycled.
Great. Thank you so much for that. It's very much heartening to hear that your commitment, as well as this impressive efforts to build this circular approach to the waste management within your service areas. And with this in mind, I'm going to ask my boss, Carlos Manuel, to reflect. So can you reflect on the role of the shipping industry, like the one we just heard from James, and in increasing circularity on this issue of waste and plastics?
Thanks. And very happy to have James and Richard with us. And the whole shipping industry is, it's almost more than a decade that are really helping and supporting the effort of the nations, the island nations, but also working in many different ways. I remember my good old days at Conservation International and the work that we were doing in the early days, 20 years ago with the shipping industry. It is in the self-interest of this sector to really work together with all the stakeholders in implementing not just the international agreements, but in coming up with the best practices. The shipping industry and other supply company services associated to them are extremely important in the context of what we should do. I think that in part the work of the GEF is supporting the private sector, yes, definitely, in doing the innovative approaches, in putting the science, and putting together different stakeholders to dialogue and to agree. But one very important element that is very clear to me is that the private sector will be where the money is. And that is not bad at all. Sometimes people tend to believe that that's bad. No, that is the right thing to do. We need to create, so the private sector will be in the side of sustainability if governments are able to understand what they need to do to level the economic playing field. It's not going to be because of altruism, or it won't be because the private sector will go from for-profit to not-for-profit. That won't be the change. The change will happen when governments really understand that they need to level the economic playing field. Yesterday I was saying that that every time we pollute the environment, destroy the forest, the GDP increases. Well, that's a very good example of how far we are from where we need to be. And if we use this kind of GDP to measure development and growth, we have a major issue. I'm a strong critic of many of these policies, particularly the tax policies. We tax everything positive we do in our society. They tax your income, your salary, your property, your transactions, and we don't tax the negative externalities that we do. So we at the GEF understand that we need to work with governments, providing the political dialogues and spaces, providing the data, providing the innovative approach. The innovative approach is not coming with a new practice that helps produce more sustainable. An innovative approach is not designing a new machine that will offset carbon emissions. Innovative approaches is doing good policies, good sound policies. And this is what we need. The private sector is able to think longer term than governments. Unfortunately, governments are unable to think beyond 4 or 5 years. But private sector, they can think way long term. Nevertheless, we are far from having the enabling frameworks, institutional frameworks, policy frameworks, so the private sector can be big time. We're asking the private sector to stop financing oil and gas, and that is not going to happen from a week to another week. We need to understand the transitions. Those transitions need to be based on the best practices from the political point of view, and we need to really understand that we have this responsibility to work at the governmental level. So I think that definitely the private sector is on board with all of these initiatives, and I think that in this case, it's not just the islands initiative is not just an initiative that is aiming to bring solid waste and toxic out of the environment. This is the greatest opportunity that we have to do those political engagements in these island nations, to create those policies where we help them level the economic playing field, so it makes a lot of economic sense to the private sector to invest big time, to expand big time in an environment where they will strongly contribute to zero net emissions and nature positive, pollution free. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel. Okay, so now we're going to go to Richard from Carnival. How has Carnival's approach to environmental management evolved over the recent years? And can you tell us a little bit about your Carnival's contribution to island's objectives overall? Over to you.
Sure, I'm not sure I can top Carlos's comments. I thought those were excellent. So as you can imagine, over the decades, shipping and the cruise industry, like a lot of industries, has really shifted from being totally focused on compliance to looking at the world from a much more sustainable perspective. Back in the day, we've always pretty much recycled, but maybe that was the extent of it. Today, we're aligning our 2030 and our 2050 goals right along with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We are maniacally looking at ways of reducing single-use items throughout our supply chain, throughout all of the guest experiences on board. His comments about that it's good for business for us to do the right thing in the environment is absolutely true. One of probably the most important decision point when somebody's picking a cruise is, where does that cruise go? So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're not only not causing degradation in destinations, but that we're doing our part to make sure that we're helping to correct anything that has already happened. So we've really had a kind of a mindset change throughout the industry. It's not just at Carnival. This is something that the industry has been understanding better and better over the decades, that it is good business to have, beautiful, pristine oceans and terrestrial places to go to, because, when our guests go ashore, they don't want to see plastic bottles on the beach. They don't want to be told, well, you can't go in that lagoon anymore because it's been polluted by chemicals, et cetera. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're part of the solution, not just trying to avoid making it worse. So I think one of the ways that we can contribute is, one of the things that we do well is we carry a lot of people around the world, and we do it very well. And I think that goes along with how do we manage people, how do we educate people on how they should behave on board, but also how they should behave when they go ashore. We have great partnerships in the various regions of the world that we operate. So we already have existing networks and coalitions throughout the cruise industry and throughout the tourism sectors. And that includes, the cruise lines themselves, the ports, the government, the hoteliers, the Shorex providers, the retail stores that are on the beach when we take guests to island destinations. So I think that's one of the things that we can do, is that we can kind of help leverage the existing networks that are already there. It's great to hear about the Caribbean Youth Environmental Network that the minister mentioned, and I think that's going to be critical in getting some of this initiative going, because we can have a ship that would bring the waste back, but we have to make sure that it's a community approach where we're looking at recycling, that it's not somebody else's job to recycle, that it's everybody's in a community's job. So I would say, and in the end, one of the things is that, we'll help however we can, because it is so important to us as a business.
Thank you so much for that. So now I'm going to be asking Excellency Anita Montauk to reflect on what Richard just said. Could you share your perspectives and perhaps a little bit of expectations from St. Lucia in collaborating with the cruise industry moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I got a little excited hearing the contribution from Mr. James Woodrow, in terms of he's saying that he's going to be working with the seeds to export the waste free of charge, because this is one of the challenges that we have some plastics. In as much as we have a few initiatives like the Replast I mentioned, we are still challenged in terms of getting plastic waste out of St. Lucia. And it is about working in collaboration with, well, from the government standpoint, working with the private sector, working with the various stakeholders in order to make it happen. Because as I mentioned in my speech, we really do not have, we cannot even identify a landfill. What we have is almost full to capacity, and just getting the land space is a challenge for us. So it is important that in situations like these, that we work as collaboratively with the cruise line, the government, the private sector, and I believe that is the only way that we can be able to develop policies, if we work as a team to try to manage the plastic waste. Because as you would well imagine, that this is why we are here today. It is a problem. It is a global problem. And if I were to go back to your question, could you just repeat?
I think you have very ably addressed the question, which is what are your perspectives and expectations, particularly from the collaboration with the cruise industry?
Did I answer?
Yes, you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we go to Iberostar, Ms. Megan Morikawa from Iberostar, who's joining us virtually. Oh, there you are. Okay, so Iberostar is considered as a leader in reducing waste, and we wanted to ask you if you can reflect on key lessons you have learned, and also comment on how this particular initiative, the Islands Initiative, may provide a vehicle, a platform to scale efforts in waste reduction in other hotels and industries. So over to you, Megan.
Really wonderful. Are you all able to hear me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I wish that I could be with you in person, but I'm glad at least for the opportunity to be able to listen and engage. I'm very excited about the discussions and directions, as well as the launch of the Islands program itself. I think I love this dialogue about the ocean, right? Because the ocean, too, for a company like Iberostar, is literally the product. Ocean health is the product. We have over 100 hotels in 16 countries, mostly in the Caribbean and in the Mediterranean. 80% of those are coastal. And so if our beaches are degrading, if we're threatened from flooding, if we don't have healthy supply chains, then we are literally also at risk to be able to have this long-term vision. And it's one of the reasons why at Iberostar, as Global Director of the Sustainability Office, alongside very strong leadership from our organization, from the family that owns the company to our executive committee, have launched our Wave of Change movement, which is our commitment across all of our properties. If the building has the name Iberostar on it, it counts towards this commitment. of objectives, like removing all single-use plastics from our operations, which we achieved in 2020, mid-pandemic, mid an uptick globally in an increase of use on single-use plastics. We have objectives to send no waste to landfill across all of our operations by 2025, and a lot of that is where this intersects with the work that we do with islands. We also have objectives to reach carbon neutrality across not only our direct operations, but our supply chain by 2030, well before the 2050 target, and objectives to have all of the nature that surrounds our properties in improving ecological health alongside profitable tourism in the places that we operate. In order to tackle any of this, we absolutely fundamentally understand we need to have moonshot objectives and high standards within our own organization, but we also need to be guided by science. It's one of the reasons that I actually came to the industry from the academic sector. I did a PhD at Stanford in marine biology, and I'm now bringing that along with a large team of scientists to every day making this a reality within our organization, in our destinations. But above all, none of that makes a difference if we can't make impacts in our destinations, if we cannot work in these massive public-private partnerships to be able to shift infrastructure, right? In so many ways, when you have objectives as ambitious as our own, it becomes very easy to say, well, we'll just build solutions within our own facilities. But we have very much the opposite philosophy, that we need to lean in and engage and understand how the SIDS that we're working in, of which in islands we overlap with the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Cape Verde, how we really lean into having these discussions and finding those bottlenecks to solve them as quickly as possible. I think in terms of what we have learned, what we want to provide as an industry as a whole is to make ourselves not the bottleneck, the industry, right, as quickly as possible. We want to be engaging in our supply chain, looking for ways to be able to ensure that the products that we're bringing into our operations in the first place are not going to be problematic at the end of their use when we have objectives like sending no waste to landfill. Every product needs to have a material use after its use when it comes to our properties. We start to run up into questions about infrastructure and capacity to be able to manage various waste streams. But really, I think this also demonstrates us our ability to want to have as quickly as possible these conversations, right, about these bottlenecks, to find the public-private solutions within them. But I also think very excitingly, as we have a reasonably diverse private sector panel, to see the ways in which we have synergies with each other, right? In the Islands program, we also have leaders in waste management. It'll be wonderful to hear how that private sector can teach other private sector in the places that we are operating. And we're very much looking forward to ways in which we can serve as a set of guidance for other hospitality actors. We encourage as well through the Islands Project the ability to capacity build across our own competitors and create facilitating environments for pre-competitive collaboration in order for us to really move this forward. Because again, no matter how much we do within our own walls, it doesn't really make a scalable impact unless we can start to solve this in the destinations. And we're enthusiastic to be involved with such an ambitious project like this to help take the next steps.
Thank you so much, Megan, for bringing up some very important points, not to be a bottleneck, but you touched upon the infrastructure as well as the capacity issue. And it's really interesting and encouraged to basically hear from all three private sector representative here about the importance of the public-private sector partnership, as well as being on the same page. And I would also add that pretty impressive to hear that the Iberostar is engaged with a PhD marine scientist on their team. So I think informed by science is also another point that would be good to bring up more cogently here. So now I'm going to go to Rolf Payet, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on a particular question. So with all these efforts to address plastic waste scaling up internationally, how important are the engagement and involvement of companies like Iberostar? And building on that particular question, how can the UN system engage with and be informed by these experiences moving forward? Thanks, Rolf.
Thank you very much, Cheese. I mean, the private sector is involved throughout the whole life cycle. So upstream, downstream. And if you permit me to talk about upstream, is you have such companies that has been talking in the tourism industry, for example. We have a number of examples where those companies are actually leading the way. And it's not about, I think Carlos Manuel said, reinventing technology. It's there. Having a water bottling, a small water bottling plant on an island in a hotel saves not only the problem of plastic waste, but the carbon footprint of shipping those water bottles from Evian, sorry, I'm close to Evian here, from Evian on a plane, landing in that country after the shipping, sorry, my friends from shipping, and then on a small schooner, to this island, 1,000 miles from anywhere, and then being stuck there. Whereas a small little water bottling in a hotel, actually there's education around it, there's awareness around it, there's sustainability around it, and people learn to value, and also it reduces the water pressure on the small island, because the small island also has water pressures, water. So the win-win of these initiatives, and I've just used an example here of a simple PET water bottle or thing, is amazing when you start adding the figures together. And the business value or the business case for this is, for me, a no-brainer at all. Now, this is upstream. Downstream is when we are looking at the waste that is generated now by the industry, which cannot be dealt with. That PET bottle from, sorry again, Evian, from Evian, who ends up in this island in Tuvalu, and now has to be dealt with. Now, for example, Tuvalu will import maybe 10,000 bottles. But when you look at the economies of scale for actually recycling those bottles into flower pots or floorboards or whatever, simply doesn't make sense, because the cost of energy is very high on the islands. The cost of the amount that you need to, the source material, in this case, the PET bottles, is not viable at all, because you suddenly you have a plant which is not small enough. You run it through a day, you've used the whole stock, and you have to wait for people to. So there's a tendency for people to generate more pets so that your business becomes more viable. So the fact of scaling this up and working with the shipping companies, which then takes them to centers where they can achieve the economies of scale. They can also recycle this PET into secondary PET, which is now big thing around the world. Also makes business sense. And again, I think it's a no-brainer. So both upstream and downstream efforts, initiatives based on this very simple example, if we start looking at it, makes sense. And that's why I think this project is so vital in the engagement of the private sector, upstream, downstream, but also transboundary, the shipping industry, which plays a role in making this happen. Because without, I had this, one more minute, this biggest debate in the UNFCCC when I was a climate negotiator. In Europe, I can take a train to anywhere, although sometimes it will take me 12 hours to get to Stockholm, but I will get to Stockholm. To get to Seychelles, you cannot take a train. A boat will take you 3 weeks from East Africa or from India. Seriously. The only way to get there is a plane, guys. Yeah. So we don't have an option. We have to use planes. So connectivity to the rest of the world is vitally important for islands. So including them, including the shipping, including the airline industry in this whole process is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm cognizant that I am between the reception and the closing of this panel, but I would like to open it up for perhaps a round of questions and answers. If you'd like to answer, pose a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself. And in addition to your question, please inform to whom your question is directed at. So the floor is open. Don't be shy. Yes, please, sir.
Vaughn Miller, Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources from the Bahamas. And my question is directed to Mr. Pruitt of Carnival Cruise Lines. May I?
Yes, please, sir.
Thank you. Yes. of course, we've had as a country, a wonderful long relationship with Carnival Cruise, and I have just several questions I'd like to pose. Given the unique sensitivities of the marine environment of small island states to marine pollution, I'd like to know Carnival's philosophy on marine protection, and also how specifically has Carnival implemented this philosophy, particularly with small island states, cruise destinations. And then another question.
I would say when it comes, if we're talking about marine environment, we're really talking primarily about wastewater and liquid discharges. So I would say that as an industry, and as Carnival Corporation over the last several decades, we've been adding significantly to the capacity for advanced wastewater treatment on board our ships, which treats sewage and gray water. And we start out with a principle that under international law and under national laws, there are certain distances from land that you can discharge wastewater. Well, as an industry, we're taking it beyond that. So we're discharging further from land. We're increasing the number of ships and the number of berths that are basically protected by these advanced wastewater systems.
Could you repeat the last part of it?
That we're increasing the numbers of ships and berths that are protected or that are basically protected by in these advanced wastewater systems that will treat all of the black and gray water on the ship.
Are there any successful marine mitigation projects that Carnival has been directly involved in other countries? And if so, do you care to elaborate on it?
I'm sorry, the first part of your question?
Are there any successful marine mitigation projects that you've been involved with in other countries?
I know that we're working with the Bahamas on the two destinations where I believe that there are solid scientifically based coral relocation and coral mitigation projects that are in place now for those two projects. As you know, we just broke ground on the Grand Bahama site, which was great news.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to also announce that with regards to single-use plastics, plastic utensils, plastic bags, and styrofoam, that since 2020, we have successfully banned the use of them in the Bahamas. And so we're very serious in our approach to this and our involvement with it.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I think that was a response to your intervention. Rolf, would you like to say anything on this one?
I'll just say this is one of the first things every small island state should do, is put in place policies that ban those single-use plastics. Some countries might take some time, but put in the structures in place. You will have a cultural uproar because we become dependent on plastics. In Seychelles, they banned even balloons. Balloons is now banned in the Seychelles because we had it all over the beaches and everything. Straws, and they had to find for alternatives. So some countries maybe cannot do it immediately. They'll take time, a year or so. But I really encourage countries to really put in place, and you'll see the biggest difference that will make in your country. And there are options. It's not that there are no alternatives. There are options. There's local industry as well that can come out of it, and there are a lot of options. So single-use plastics, I think, should be done with in the small islands. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Rolf, as well as Your Excellency. Any other questions from the audience? Why don't we go to you first, and lady over there. So, sir, please.
Okay. My name is Laureanus Les Flores from the island of St. Lucia, and I want to thank the panelists for their comments, particularly the cruise, Carnival, and Swire Shipping. I am actually very impressed that Swire Shipping has instituted a program for removing waste from the Pacific free. In St. Lucia, the cost of shipping is extremely high, and prior to the pandemic, so even now, the cost of shipping has basically, well, gone through the roof, reaching the sky now. And one of the issues for recycling in St. Lucia is, like Ralph mentioned, is the low volumes of material that is generated in the island. So you find that it takes a long time to collect those plastics. And in relation to the Replast project, it can be successful, but that project is facing challenges because the plastics, shipping plastics in a container is not viable because of the weight of it. So what happens is that the recyclers have to include other material in that container to make up the weight, for example, cardboard paper. So I wish that the shipping lines that operate in St. Lucia could adopt the same practice as Squire Shipping, because that would go a long way in solving a lot of the issues with regards to recycling. We're a small economies, all the islands are small, and a number of initiatives have started, or well, have been investigated over the years to see if recycling could be done on a regional basis. For example, one island would consolidate, the material would be consolidated in one island and shipped all the same time. But that has not happened because of logistics issue. So I hope a number of shipping lines, shipping lines within the Caribbean are listening and would take an example from Squire Shipping in order to address that issue of the high shipping costs. The other issue I have is the other issue I want to address is with the cruise ships. In St. Lucia, we accept waste from cruise ships. Like the PS indicated earlier on, we have limited land space for landfills. Our landfills are filling up, not only in St. Lucia, but in other Caribbean islands. So if the cruise ship could minimize the amount of waste that is disposed or deposited, discharged in those islands, that would go a long way in extending the life of our landfills, because the revenue we get would not cut it to produce, to develop new landfills. So my plea would be for cruise ships to minimize as much as possible the waste that is discharged in the islands, because we really do not have the capacity, the landfill capacity, to manage that waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Why don't we go to the lady over there, and then we'll quickly refer back to our panelists to see if they can add additional perspectives. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Nanette Law, and I come from the Seychelles. I would like to, first of all, thank the panelists for the fruitful discussion, especially with regards to the involvement of the private partners. In Seychelles, I would like to echo the same comments made by the previous speaker. In Seychelles, because we are remotely located, we find it very challenging for us with regards to the exportation of waste, shipping the waste back. And recently, as Professor Pius stated, we've been informed formally by the shipping lines that they will not be taking the waste anymore. So this is a challenge for us, and we've listened with great interest with regards to SWIRE initiatives. And we wish that, I think I talk on behalf of the other islands within the Western Indian Ocean, we wish that the shipping lines coming to the Western Indian Ocean comes up with the same initiative. Maybe Swire can share with us the challenges or the how this has been able to be developed successfully, so that we can, on our side, talk to the different shipping lines coming to the islands. Secondly, with regards to the implementation of the Islands Project, I think one of the challenges for us is the fact that we do have the regional centers that are supposed to kind of support us. Maybe within the Western Indian Ocean, we have a smaller, I don't know, a unit or something that can maybe help us to implement the project more successfully. Because even though we form part of the African region, most of the countries are landlocked countries, and they do not maybe face the same issues that we have. And so implementation or support from the regional center may be not as expected by the small islands. So I think maybe a new mechanism can be put in place so that the countries or the island states within the Western Indian Ocean may benefit from.
Thank you for that. Can we quickly go to James and then to Richard, and also ask Megan to reflect on the questions as well as statements made so far? Over to you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. So it was 4 years ago that we started the program shipping waste for free out of the Pacific Islands. And why do we do it? We did it because it was the right thing to do, because we're bringing the goods in, and we're being paid for that. And we decided that as part of our contribution to the communities we serve, that we would take the waste out for free. We started that 4 years ago when shipping lines actually weren't doing very well, and we did it because it's the right thing to do. The good thing at the moment is that shipping lines are making money, they are doing well. So I think it's a good time for you to be talking to the shipping lines servicing your various islands and saying to them, well, look, you're bringing the goods in, you're being paid for that. Why don't you support the communities which you're serving and take out the waste for free? That's the project, which is a child project, is the Islands Waste Free Shipping Partnership. What we're trying to do is explain what we've done as SWA Shipping, and we're trying to get other shipping lines, both in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, but also in the Caribbean, to do the same thing. So I'm going to be co-chair of that project, and we're going to be trying to say, look, this is what we've done, it does work, and you can make a difference. You can make a difference for the people that you're serving. You know, we have staff in all the islands, so we can really make a difference. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think we've got a good chance of persuading shipping lines at the moment that this is something that they should also be doing. So that's what we're going to work towards.
All right, thank you so much. Over to you.
I would say that for the Caribbean, hopefully in the near future there'll be some good news on this front. One of the things that happened about 4 years ago when Ludovic approached me about this initiative, it got me thinking along these very lines, and I reached out to a very large shipper in the Caribbean, and I had this very conversation, and I got a very positive response from them. And recently I reached out to another shipper who also similarly was interested in participating in this type of a project. So hopefully in the future we'll have some good news on these lines. And to the point about landing waste, you know, one of the things that we do is actually all of the vendors that we land waste to, we actually vet them. We look through their government licenses and we make sure that there's no negative media. So before we ever land anything, we do a due diligence check on everybody that we go to. And we have hundreds and hundreds of vendors that we've done this process. But if there's a concern that you have with us landing waste, we certainly don't want to be part of that problem. So if now that I know that, I can certainly go back and I can tell not only Carnival Corporation lines, but I'll also, you know, bring this up to the larger industry that there's probably needs to be a bit of a moratorium on that for St. Lucia. Now, there may be times when a ship has had some type of an incident that they really, for safety, fire safety, you know, human health, et cetera, they may need to land things. And so they may ask, but I'll bring that back.
Great, thank you so much for that, Richard. So now we're going to go to Megan real quickly. Megan?
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fascinating and incredible to hear the questions and discussion. I think that if there's any sort of thought or synthesis, especially in the launch of this project and the hope towards the engagement with the private sector, you know, before joining Iberostar, I spent a decade in academia thinking about characterizing the ocean's biggest problems and the ways in which the private sector should engage in solutions around it. In coming to the private sector side of things, I realized, especially in travel and tourism, which is a really integral part in many of these countries and many of the solutions, it's incredibly heterogeneous. It's a hugely heterogeneous industry with very different players, very different scales of capacity, very different business models. And I think really embracing that heterogeneity so that we can understand and empathize with the various needs on the public sector and the private sector side really help us to be able to take steps to look towards solutions, just like we can't create a solution that's one size fits all for all of our destinations. It's challenging to make a solution that's one size fits all for many of the private industry as well that are engaging in this space. And so I think this is a message that we have found has really helped us to be able to scale solutions very quickly, and can be also a thought to bring into the launch of the Islands program as well, to embrace that heterogeneity, because in there lie many of the unique solutions.
Thank you so much for that. Now, I'd like to close this panel discussion as well as this engagement by thanking all of you for being here. And I do have to say, for a launch of this very exciting program, we already have very insightful as well as good start of a conversation from different players, from the convention executive secretaries, the head of CEO of the GEF, as well as three very distinguished private sector entities, as well as two ministers. So thank you very much for your engagement. And I think this only bodes well for the success of the implementation of this particular program. And we're very much looking forward to working with all of you. So I'd like to thank all of you for a round of applause. There's going to be a recording of this particular side event that's going to be made available, and everyone's invited to join the Islands Communities of Practice on the Green Forum. This is what I was asked to say to all of you. And now I'm very excited to invite all of you for reception outside to really have further conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panelists if they could join with us just for a picture to register this launching. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Megan. Wherever you might be. Thank you so much.
No, excellent.
That
It's going to
was
be an
really-
exciting project.
This is great.